Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Well, I guess this is the first time that they're seeing me.
I know. It's so cool. I know. Our new senior aide here at District 1.
Hi, I'm Riley Hodges. Nice to meet you all. You probably met me last office hours that we had.
Yeah, we've had some transition, and it's a little bit like riding a bike without the training wheels when Lee's not here on the couch with us. So Lee, if you're tuning in, just know
we miss you.
That we're like, we're still pedaling, but we do miss you. But I'm so grateful that Riley's here and that we are continuing the good work in District 1 for our residents, and didn't miss a beat. She came in and was like, I feel like she's already been here for a year. It's amazing.
Well, let's get started. Commissioner, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Today was a very busy, good day.
Busy and good.
For me to say it was a good day, I'm like, it was a good day. It felt very like we moved the needle today.
That's good. Okay, so let's get started. So we're going to talk about BCC. And if some of you don't know, BCC means Board of County Commissioners.
Yeah, so the government, and I mean local, state, federal, all love to acronym everything, right? So there's all these letters flying around, and we forget because we use them so regularly that there isn't a glossary out there. So Board of County Commissioners, of course, is my position. I'm a county commissioner for District 1, West Orange County, and the Board of County Commissioners meets every other week or whatever. It's like either, twice a month or every 2 weeks, and does the business of the county. And of course, in short, you'll see us talk about BCC, or you'll see it in a, some kind of an update, but that is our Board of County Commission activity. It's also what we describe the meetings as. So when we have a board meeting, we call it a BCC meeting.
Okay. So what about the consent agenda? What is that?
So poor Riley starts, and I show her, this is what we go over. And I think she thought it was for like the year, and it was this thick, and it was for this 2 weeks. And it's our consent agenda is part of the agenda. And of course, our agenda binders are really big, but they vary every 2 weeks based on what the business of the county is looking at for that particular time. When we're renewing contracts or when we're looking at sometimes procurement items, which is how the county buys things, those can be thick. Anytime you buy anything, you can imagine all the paperwork that goes with that. Well, it's all vetted through the county. So we make sure that all of that is transparent and part of the agenda packet. And the consent agenda usually has some really, really important updates as far as our investments or annexations or other things that are going on in the county, but it doesn't get discussed the way that sometimes work session items or discussion items get discussed. So we try really hard to highlight in our newsletter, sign up if you haven't already, and in our social media posts, and of course when we talk during office hours, we try to make sure people know when there's important things that are coming up through that consent agenda, because really they don't necessarily get vetted out or talked about during the Board of County Commission meeting because they're part of that package that's voted on.
And is it open to the public? I believe
it's always open to the public. The Board of County Commission meetings, and not only is it open, but the days that we have a lot of public participation are the days that I live for. It's why I did this job. When I see people caring enough that they want to participate, either by coming in and giving comment or just being there or even writing in, to me it feels like democracy is reaffirmed every time that happens. And I work for you, so hearing from you is important. And the consent agenda, because it isn't part of the discussion agenda or work session agenda, we may not be talking about those items, but it doesn't mean that if you know something about something on the consent agenda and you want to talk about it, it's always open. So if there's an issue in that consent agenda that you feel like is an important one to talk about, and for instance, I think we talked earlier about some of the transfers to the city of Winter Garden and road transfers. And it's not controversial in the way that I don't think anybody would want us to pull it from the agenda, but it may be a topic for conversation and what that means and where those are and how does this play into the East Winter Garden community redevelopment plans. And so anybody is welcome to weigh in on that. We just don't get to discuss it down there as sort of a more debatable item.
That sounds good. Okay, so you talked about Winter Gardens. Let's talk about that a little bit. Winter Gardens road and drainage. So what does the public need to know, and how does it affect the local residents?
Yeah, so there's it's good news. We've been working for a long time to make sure that there weren't any pockets in Winter Garden that were not incorporated into Winter Garden. And so the city of Winter Garden has done a tremendous job of getting, annexations done that allowed for service across the city that's uninterrupted. And, as part of that, the county, we've worked closely with the city officials in renewing the community redevelopment program, which basically allows the community to reinvest.
Okay.
It defers property tax increases and allows the differential to go back into the community. And so, with that, there were a few places that the city of Winter Garden just knew that they would be able to get some things done faster in completing sidewalk projects and road work. And so having that transfer of rights is really important. Well, it's a little blip on our agenda, but it's still really important because at the at the end of the day, one of our biggest responsibilities is to make sure that our roadways and sidewalks are complete and safe. And so to see that and know that that's going into that East Winter Garden investment and that the city of Winter Garden has just been really, so good about making sure that there was nothing left just dangling out there, not taken care of, and that consistency of service is there for our residents.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So back to school is coming up. Could you give a little bit about the Head Start update?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize that Head Start is part of the county's investment in our community, and we work, in conjunction with the federal government and state officials also, but specifically the funding comes from the federal government for Head Start through our Department of Children and Families here. And we have an amazing team that works with those children, and we have really seen a lot of growth in the programming and opening up new classrooms. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. And it was a really frustrating thing to see that the enrollment numbers went down. Understandably, there are people who didn't want to send their children into classrooms to sit in places where they weren't sure if they were going to be exposed. I think there are a lot of people who are still really concerned because not all children have been vaccinated yet, and they're not sure who is and who isn't. And so it's an understandable concern. On the educator side, there's a lot of concern that we're missing a lot of these kids, and that by the time they start kindergarten, they're not right. And so Head Start has over and over again demonstrated really quality results in getting kids ready for school. And it's been this amazing really boost in the overall learning across our county to see the robust Head Start program. So hopefully now that we've, come out of what I'm hoping is that time where we didn't have the availability for vaccinations at all ages, that we'll be able to see some more confidence of, families sending their little ones back to classrooms where they can get hands-on, because at that age, that pre-kindergarten age,
crucial.
It's all like manipulatives, and it's doing things where they're discovering sensory discovery and social discovery. And so I'm hopeful that in the fall we'll be back to full. If you have any questions about the Head Start program, please reach out. We've got lots of information.
Awesome. So Visit Orlando nominations. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so this was on the discussion agenda. So moving off of the consent, and if you look at the big binder, there's these tabs, and tab 1 is typically the consent agenda, and it has all those sort of contractual agreements that are critical. They're really important, and we try to highlight those. But then we move on to discussion, which allows for discussion, and then after that we have work session, and then we go into usually land use cases. So in our discussion portion, there was actually nominees for Visit Orlando board appointment. And this was the first time this happened since I was in office, where a board appointment was sort of not something that turns over regularly, and there's not an appointment from each district. So it's a very limited opportunity, but it's very important because that board looks over really the expenditures of our tourist development tax. And so it's somebody that typically has some background either in hospitality or government, or both is ideal, or somebody who really understands sort of that statutory framework for the tourist development tax and has an understanding of our Visit Orlando organization. So Visit Orlando is a strange state of Florida entity, which is weird, but so it says Visit Orlando, so you're like, wait, I don't understand, that's a state of Florida thing. The state of Florida, our tourist development tax, the state of Florida basically by statute requires counties to utilize that tax a certain way. And there's been a lot of push to try to make that tax more flexible. There's no appetite for it. I think the lobby from the tourist industry is really strong. So here in Orlando, the way that we're able to spend part of that money is through the Visit Orlando. It's its own entity, and we have a fantastic person running that right now, Cassandra, who I really believe has a heart for this community, and I'm so glad she's there. And we are engaged at all times with Visit Orlando because it utilizes tax dollars. Because part of that tourist development tax here in Orange County, we're accountable for that, and we need to be transparent. We need to have citizen input. So having an appointee on that board is important. And we had a really great resident in District 1, my friend Steven, who applied, who had, what I felt like were all the qualifications that were really great professionally, but then also on a personal note, is somebody who really has a heart for his community and has, since I've known him, always participated in more than one way in giving back. And this is somebody that sits on, a board of a nonprofit that is, consistently trying, not a big nonprofit, like one of the smaller ones. And he wants to, establish his own food pantry out of his restaurant. And he delivered pizza to people waiting in line for voting, and just somebody
heart for the people,
but also has a really strong background in hospitality. What we were not told ahead of time was that depending on when the applications for that appointment came in, that's how the board discussed and then voted on those applications. So no one even got to vote on the District 1 or Stephen's application or him as a nominee, because the very first one that was discussed got 4 votes, and that's all you need. And so it was disappointing to not be able to put him in that position and see him really be a benefit to everybody in Orange County. But hopefully we'll continue to find ways to make sure people who have that kind of passion still get to participate.
Absolutely.
If you are listening to this, or you're, you've kind of considered maybe getting involved, this was a very different type of appointment, but there are a lot of boards out there that we need people to sit on and be part of. And they have a lot of different roles, all the way from, evaluating sometimes things in specific areas. So we have lake boards on for some of the areas where there's bodies of water, all the way to our Children and Family Services Board, which really helps oversee our foster system. So if you have an interest in anything that has a government advisory board, and please go to ocfl.net and take a look at those boards, fill out an application, reach out to us, and we can help navigate that path. It doesn't mean that I can't pull enough strings to get somebody specifically where, we're on there, because there's a process, but we want to make sure that we're getting as many people into the pipeline as possible. I mean, that's how you have a really good, involved, I think, community and local government, is by having people placed in all of those levels.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move on. Summertime, everybody knows, is also hurricane time. So
I cannot believe it. I know.
let's get on that hurricane season update.
Yeah, so this is, I want to thank our Office of Emergency Management. Holy cow. Sleep good at night knowing these people are amazing. The amount of technology they have and continue to upgrade and invest in and research, and the ability they have to communicate with the public and to communicate with leaders, and their partnership really also with communications across the board. So their partnerships with internet providers, with telephone providers, with our even local news media, gives really a great opportunity to make sure that people have time to prepare. That being said, now is the time to prepare, right? So it's good that we get this communication that says, okay, it's coming, but have what you need now, have a plan now. And if you live somewhere that you're on a well, or that you have some other vulnerability, modular homes, or homes that are in floodplains, some kind of vulnerability, do your due diligence now. Make sure that your flood insurance is up to date. Check with our Office of Emergency Management here to see if they have any ideas for you. We oftentimes, they have such great events and give out battery operated radios, which sounds archaic, but when you lose the internet,
You need it.
and you lose your cell service, you can still get updates on those radios. And they have an antenna. They look like something from well, my youth, quite frankly, but they're really amazing when there's no other way to get information. So I encourage that type of preparedness. It's not a lot, it doesn't take too much, but just something so that you're not scrambling at the last minute and competing, because I think it's a really scary thing when supplies get scarce and we're getting closer to an oncoming hurricane or some kind of event that people are trying to prepare for, and you show up at the store and the shelf, and it's panic buying. You know, we talked about, and it was kind of cool that it came up at the BCC, the tips and tricks for hurricane season. Like, I don't buy bottled water. I just don't want to, I don't like that they're stealing from our springs, so I don't buy bottled water, period. And I save all my kids' old sports bottles and any bottles I get as a giveaway, you know, for like a race or something. And if a hurricane's coming and they're saying, oh, stock up on the water, I fill all of those and then put them in the back of the fridge. And I fill Tupperware with ice and stick it in the freezer, and then I've got blocks of ice. And then I didn't have to spend any money at all. And, you know, we are, fortunately, I mean, the majority of the county is on county water, and ideally wouldn't lose water if the power went out. But we don't know that, because it can come, you know, the power outage can be at a lift station, or could be at one of the utility places, not necessarily in your home, that causes a disruption. And that's why you do need the water, but you don't have to go out and spend $100 on bottled water. Look for things around your house. And I think we can all kind of get prepared without having to spend that money and having that panicked feeling. I think the food issue, you know, people get very panicked about what they need at that time. And, you know, as long as you have non-perishables, right? What we want to make sure we're doing is not rushing out and buying things you're going to throw in a fridge that's going to lose power. So things that'll last a while on your shelf, it's the way to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you prepared?
I think I'm prepared. I think I'm pretty prepared. I think from listening to her, I need to get more prepared, though. So now we're going to move on to the septic tank subgroup.
Okay.
So could you tell us a little bit about that, or if people don't know?
Yeah, this is exciting, because speaking of utilities, there's a big push right now across the state, and a special amount of effort that's been put forth here in Orange County through our Orange County Utilities Department, and they are amazing, to transition the population that is on existing septic, and especially the older septic tanks, to transition them either into a more upgraded septic that's not leaching, or ideally getting them on county sewage. Now, why is that important? Because septic tanks are storing human waste, and they don't last forever, and sometimes they weren't ever installed the right way at the right depth, and they require maintenance. And then the effect of the degrading of a septic tank is that pollution will leach into the ground and go into our groundwater. So really the first, you know, excuse the pun, bubblings of our issues with septic came out when our springs started to show signs of higher nutrient loads. And they're able to really narrow it down and realize that this is an issue not just with septic, but it's also an issue with fertilizer. And as you all remember, earlier in this year, we got the fertilizer ordinance across the finish line. So we know we're working on that side. And we know that you shouldn't be fertilizing right now with your summer ban. So thank you for doing that, and try to remind your friends and family, neighbors. But we also have to get at it from the septic side. And not everyone's going to be able to afford to dig their septic tank out and to, you know, go on to county. It's not practical in many places, because there isn't any county place to hook up. So the idea of this particular work group, and we're going to have more than one work group, was looking at the alternatives. So if you are somebody who has septic right now and may not be eligible for a sewer hookup, what else can we do? And there's other options, which is, to me, it feels optimistic that we have ways that are less expensive to upgrade that septic to still keep us from polluting the groundwater. So we're going to continue to kind of amass that research, and then look first at our vulnerable areas. And when I say vulnerable areas, we're looking at areas that are very populated with people with dwelling units that are on septic, close to bodies of water. So, of course, with District 1 being where District 1 is, beautiful West Orange County, we have all those amazing lakes out there. You know, the Butler Chain of Lakes is a Florida Outstanding Waterway. So it's already protected in a way that we want to make sure that we're being really diligent about protecting the water. Well, lo and behold, if you look at that map of the septics tanks in existence in District 1, the big majority of them are actually very close to some of those waterways. And Windermere was, pretty much a solid blanket of areas where we could, hopefully work on getting people upgraded. Around Johns Lake, there was several. So there's going to be opportunities that I think that if we can manage to get funding from different buckets, state funding, county, and then hopefully get some really involvement from the community, that we'd be able to transition those people off of septic and protect those waterways.
Absolutely.
So there'll be 4 working groups. We're going to continue to get that information out. And then if you are in one of those areas that's considered vulnerable, and you know that because you live near a lake and you've got a septic, you're probably going to hear from us at some point. Or if you want to jump in now and get involved in this conversation, we have a great amount of information from our utilities department. They are fantastic because they send over, I think they work on things that are so complex. Utilities is complex, but they send over to us to explain things like this vulnerability zones, really clear maps that show exactly where those septics are. So we're going to continue to gather that information and look for opportunities to offset the costs of upgrading.
Absolutely. So now we're going to go into rent stabilization, something, a hot topic of the week.
Yeah, this week was so strange. So Riley just got here because she's like, well, every day is kind of strange. So usually our Board of County Commission meetings are Tuesdays, and the business goes long. A lot of times we come in early in the morning and we're here until late at night because those binders are thick and there's a lot of really important issues. And I think everybody, we don't all have to agree on the board. And I actually think government works better sometimes when that happens, when we can all come with our own ideas. But the one thing I'll tell you about our Board of County Commission and our mayor is that everyone is really committed to working through those things. So nobody even blinks about having to be here sometimes for 12, 13, 14 hours in one seat. I joke about the mayor having like a steel bladder. I'm like, does the guy not go to the bathroom? Because it is long hours and stretches but it's important work. And I think everybody up there takes it very seriously. Well, rents in Orange County and actually across the state and to some extent across the country have increased so rapidly, so dramatically, and without enough notice for people to really be able to position themselves to either find another place to live or to find roommates or to negotiate, because even that can be part of the process. And we've had residents reach out from, I would say as soon as the eviction moratorium was ended, I think that's when we first started hearing from people, and it has just picked up speed. And the thing that seems most dramatic right now, Riley, is that in the beginning, it was people that you would have expected to have these problems, and we could really easily get them into the rent or rental assistance because they were people who got laid off or furloughed during the pandemic, or they had, a family member that they had to take care of during the pandemic. So we could establish that there was a COVID impact, and we knew exactly what they were missing in their back rent. What was really dramatic over these last few months is it's everybody, and it's people who say things like, "I work 2 jobs, and my rent jumped from $1,400 a month to $2,300 a month to $2,600 a month
in a matter of
5 months." And so, and across the board, our teachers, our firefighters, this wasn't like an elderly person thing. It wasn't a student thing, although we got to watch out for, people in populations that have to really watch every penny. But this was everybody. And so, I think everybody sort of understands we're in an inflationary period. This is time right now we're watching prices for everything have gone up. It was still outpacing that, right? So even if you look at the inflationary jumps, it shouldn't have gone up 27%, in the period of time that it did. So, residents rightfully came forward and said, can we do something? Can you do something? And Commissioner Bonilla, proposed looking at some stabilization measures and said, can we look around, see what other counties have done, see what other municipalities have done, and find out if there's anything that we can help people with. And the answer is yes. There's certain things that we think are going to be able to at least buy some time. There are some measures that may be a little bit longer to take effect, and we should talk about all of them. So we ended up having a special session this week, which was kind of cool to have a Thursday that felt like a Tuesday that we came in and sat downstairs in the meeting room. We didn't take public comment, which I think was hard for people because people want to talk about this, and we have a lot of really important voices that we need to bring into every one of these decisions. But what this meeting did was allow the commission to talk about the legality of some options, the reality of a timeline for all the options that are in play, and then talk about the things that I think were sort of necessary to understand about the effectively moving forward. So if we look at doing something to stabilize the rent through rent control, which means not allowing by ordinance rents to jump up over 5% in a year, if we do that, we can't just make that decision. It has to go to a ballot and then go on, a referendum, and then the voters decide that. Well, the state of Florida also very specifically has statutes that narrow the amount of time that it can be in effect and who it can affect. And so there are certain apartments that are never going to be, or certain rentals that are never going to be affected, and including holiday or vacation rentals, which in District 1, one of my concerns was that anybody that was in disagreement about the potential rent stabilization measures could say, oh, you know what, then I'm just making my holiday or vacation rentals. And so, just talking about that, what would be the negative, what would be the fallout? And then, making sure to frame it all with the fact that the statute says it can only be a year. So even if we do get something that's really useful,
we have to do it again in a year.
We either have to do it again in a year, or we better fix something between now and then. And that's when, this office, the priorities we have here, the research that we've been able to accumulate, we've really been focused on redevelopment and looking for housing opportunities in our urban corridors, density opportunities near transportation, and good redevelopment investment, right? Using the investment to not just try to patch up something. When I say paying back rents and trying to figure out how to get people out of eviction court proceedings, but actually looking at inventory and how do we incentivize good inventory, good stock in places that it's going to be helpful. So District 1, we're all the way out. So we go all the way to the Lake County line, and there have been times that I have argued about whether or not a multifamily dwelling unit is appropriate in cases that have come up in front of us. And I've received criticism because people say, well, that's so tone deaf because people need housing. And I'm like, you're exactly right. But they don't need it at the end of a dirt road, nowhere near their employment center or a school or even a bus. And so if we're looking at where we're going to put that density, all good
transportation has
exactly. All good urban planning sort of tenants tell you go to those high transportation corridors, figure out where your employment centers are, your high employers, make sure that it's close to good schools and good other resources, right? You don't want people to be far away from the hospital, fire departments. And so those things are all part of that housing inventory conversation, and that's all zoning. And so we have a lot of restrictions in our redevelopment zoning that prevent and slow down people from being able, investors from being able to come in and spend money, developers, and spend money in redevelopment of areas that could really, there's already something there. There's already infrastructure there. So we're not taking out a forest. Right. We're not going down,
adding to.
We're coming in and hopefully pulling up a parking lot, because those will, they suck a lot of land, they take a lot of money, and they don't do anything good for the environment. And looking at density opportunities in those places. And that to me feels like it's going to be the longer term effort. And I mean heavy lift effort, because we're going to have to really narrow down what's going to incentivize that. How do we bring developers in and make that look good?
Wow. So you heard it here. Okay, so we're going to do a speed round. I need you to...
I just start talking.
But it's good. It's all good conversation, and people need to know about it.
I know, and it's so important. And I think, I rely so much, like some of the things that we talk about, like I just described, I wouldn't have known without engagement with the public, without people that are out there saying, telling me this, you're boxing in this neighborhood. These people can't get out. They can't walk across the street. And so, having this relationship with our residents is everything.
Good. Okay, last thing.
Speed run. I love it.
Speed round. So we want to talk about the pet ordinance.
Oh, yes. Okay. So
Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so if you have been following the District 1 office since I've been in office, you know that one of the goals that I had coming in was to identify our pet retailers that were importing from mass breeders, puppy mills, and it had already been on record. We had a lot of residents come forward almost immediately and say, I was one of those victims. My dog came from a puppy mill. I didn't realize it. This poor dog was sick. And I ended up, not only paying exorbitant amounts of money for the pet, but then I paid exorbitant amounts of money for vet bills. I lost this dog anyway. My heart's broken. My family's heart's broken. And in the end, I still owe money on my credit card because they took credit for this. And so we did, a lot of work, came up with an ordinance that really narrowed in on only those pet retailers selling dogs, cats, and rabbits, because there was a really also some abusive rabbit breeding operations, that same sort of thing where it was a mill and they would put them in the stores in the spring and everyone would go out and get their baby bunny, and the next thing we knew, we tragically had like this really a bad problem with people dropping them off at animal services or just leaving them places. So rabbits were included, so cats, dogs, rabbits, and the county commission voted to ban any retail pet sales, because even though those retail outlets are not the puppy mills themselves, they're the endpoint, right? So supply and demand tells us that if we don't have a place to sell, that puppy mill hopefully will take a hit and decide to move on different business, right? And so it's not just here in Orange County. There were another, I don't know how many different municipalities, several other counties, very similar ordinances. I think the difference in ours was that we did not grandfather in because we had a very specific number of pet retailers, and we knew that they were bringing in pets from these mass breeders that had actually already even been in violation with the FDA for really breaking humane breeding laws. And so they had a full year to phase out, and that was this week.
Okay.
So this was the week that happened. There was a court case because the pet stores hired an attorney, immediately filed suit. The judge reviewed the injunction and then reviewed the case on its merits, and decided that under the county's directive from the state constitution to really operate and do things in the best welfare of our residents, health, safety, and welfare, that one of those things would be to make sure that they weren't being sold sick dogs and cats, that their health concerns that were coming in from these mass breeders could be affected by the ordinance that we put into place. So the judge upheld the ordinance, denied the injunction, and so it stands. Right now, they should be hopefully wrapping up whatever they had a whole year to switch over and do services, or do, if those businesses wanted to transition to be trainers or pet groomers, or, we had, during the original hearings, we had so many great business people come in who said, I'm in the pet business, but I don't sell pets. We have trainers that work out of here, or we make specialized doggy treats, or we do,
There's other avenues.
Yes, and very successful. We have Wolfgang Bakery owners came in, and they've since franchised, and they were like, no, this is, there's a lot of really good business to be had in just taking care of our pets. And we even had breeders, like the good reputable breeders, come forward and say, if you're getting a pet, if you're getting a puppy or a kitten, and you haven't met the mother of that puppy or kitten, something's wrong.
Right.
Because good breeders are really, really aware of, it's a family, right? They're aware of who's taking the puppy, and they want that puppy or kitten to be with its mother while it's in the weaning. Yes, exactly. And they're very protective. Good breeders are very protective of their breed, because they realize that some of the diseases and disorders can come from inbreeding and genetic mutations. And so they don't want to put that breed at risk by the kind of health implications of mass breeding. So there was really broad support, except for on the side of the retail outlets. So as of right now, the case is going up on appeal.
Okay.
The legal department in Orange County did a fantastic job defending the ordinance, and it stands. So what we're hoping is at the end that this ordinance stands, and then it sends a message to the puppy mills and mass breeding operations that you're closed for business in Orange County. Because Orange County did put that into effect, there were 3 more counties that followed suit.
Oh, wow.
So even if ours gets overturned,
There's other.
it's going to be an uphill battle. The whole state of New York last month, the entire state of New York banned retail pet sales for this reason. And until we figure out how to shut down those horrible, horrible breeding operations, and the majority of them are in the Midwest, and and the FDA oversees them. But these FDA officers, it's like 1 for every 100 breeding operations. And so even when they come out and they write up a violation, they don't come back for sometimes months to see the violation was fixed. Well, in the meantime, you're talking about hundreds of sick, hurt animals that are suffering there. So, it needs to be taken care of. Larger scope, federal government, the FDA needs to do something about those breeders in the Midwest that we have no control over. But on our end, the responsible thing to do is to not provide an outlet. And the responsible thing to do for our community is also make sure that they're not being taken advantage of in predatory lending, which was the other thing that was happening.
Yeah. Wow. So I think we did good today.
We got through a lot.
We got through a lot.
I know.
Well, thank you guys for joining. Do you have any last remarks? Or
you know what? Just stay tuned this weekend, because is it this weekend that we're doing our toxic tour?
Yes, this Sunday.
Okay, so we're doing a toxic tour. Stay tuned. This is going to be really interesting with the Sierra Club. I always look forward to anything that we do with them, and it should be really interesting. And it was just really good to talk to you again. Reach out, stay in touch. We will see you soon.
Bye, and don't forget, email list district1@ocfl.net. And I think that's it.
Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.